Hey everybody. Man, I look tan. So it's just Monday, and I figured I was very kind to Trump on my last recording. So I figured I got to remind everybody about all the wars. So this isn't going to be like an episode, so there won't be an iTunes or anything. This is just a video. This will end up on YouTube probably only. So it's Monday, the 1st of October. Happy October. And I'm just kind of combing through here on the internets while I do some laundry. And I figured there's got to be something going on. And I was right. So, if anybody's ever read a book called Blowback by Chalmers Johnson, well, one, it would change your outlook on wars and America and its American government and the empire. But if you haven't, you probably should. Second, Mr. Johnson was stationed in the Pacific Theater, I guess you could say. And the part in that book that really struck me was his breakdown of Okinawa. So, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, Okinawa, we have a military base there that is quite big. And the people of the Japanese island don't really give a fuck about the troops. I know it's shocking, but they don't want us there. Mostly because, and this will hurt some of my military friends, but this is just kind of the truth. They're not held to the same laws. So, with Kavanaugh, I thought I'd bring up the, statistics. Well, maybe not the statistics, but you can always go to the book. But he tells stories of how the troops there can get away with some crimes and not be held to the same standards. And you would think that this would, piss some people off, which it does. And, it helps you understand, and I'm not blaming, blaming the individual troop that does this type of thing. But when you have an empire, you have blowback. And blowback, as defined by Mr. Johnson, is the unintended consequences of unknown policies. So nobody in America knows that we have this base there. Sorry, I'm reading his article from 2003, which is way too detailed to do right now. But it breaks down, multiple cases of abduction and rape by Marines and other U.S. Servicemen that are not charged. And when you have two kinds of laws for two groups of people, resentment is going to increase, especially when one group is literally occupying the other. So why do I bring this up? Well, one, I bring this up because of Kavanaugh, and second, I bring it up because people give me shit on the right about my views on Israel, um, even though most of the articles and scholars that um, pretty much all of them, now I think about it, that I agree with and go to for their opinions and outstanding journalism are Jewish. And the reason I lean their way is for the simple fact of I'm supposed to be, and Americans, especially on the conservative side, are supposed to be, they sell themselves as these Christian rights first, family, individual rights, freedom, liberty people, but they don't seem to have any issue when a authoritarian, racist government is stealing land from people, throwing them off their property, demonizing them, dehumanizing them, killing children, arresting them in the middle of the night, and giving them different rights under the law. So much like that, in Okinawa, the people and the resentment towards the United States occupation there has grown. Much like South Korea, which nobody talks about. I mean, it's noted, but it's not centerpiece. They're not talking about that on the internet or, on CNN going, well, they did just vote for somebody whose part of his platform was get America out of the country. No, they try to sell it as we need to be there to protect them from themselves because, that's the neo-liberal view. It's also the Woodrow Wilson view, which is racism by low expectations, which is ironic in this case since every Korean I ever met is smarter than me. So why do I bring up the Okinawa thing? Well, many reasons, but today I bring it up because they had a vote. And the anti-U.S. candidate won. He ran on a policy of resisting the construction of a new U.S. Military base on Okinawa. Against the Liberal Democratic Party and the Prime Minister that's in power. He's vowed to continue fighting against a U.S.-Japanese project to move the U.S. Marines Air Station from an urban area in Okinawa to a sparsely populated region of the island. Now, that would be, I think, better in terms of affecting the culture, society, and cutting down on, this type of two different laws for the same group of people kind of thing. If you're in a more rural area, the Army can kind of separate themselves out. However, we're not supposed to be there. Now, the rest of Japan, it looks like, has been pressing Okinawa to accept the base because I'm sure they get handouts and they get backing from the United States. But much like in in America, rural Okinawa, I'm sure, is much like the flyover country. And, the people pushing for this base are probably living on the coast where it will not affect them negatively at all. Now, this is kind of big, but we'll see how Trump handles it. This is one of the things where Trump will push back, I'm sure, because he is a super America first, and this is where I part ways from my conservative buddies. He thinks the war in Yemen is like a good thing, and I don't know what he's trying to do in Afghanistan. I don't think he knows, but when it comes to something like this, now, if he makes a deal to remove some of the troops from Japan, that would be swell. But I don't see him doing that, or I at least don't see him talking about it in a way that gives the Okinawans some feeling that he understands their plight. That's just not his way. Now, Okinawa, just so you have an understanding of how small it is, it's 1% of Japanese landmass. And Japan's not a big spot. But it houses around 30,000 American troops, which is kind of crazy. Which is more than half of all the troops in Japan. And again, as I mentioned, Thomas goes deep into this in his. But it's really, I mean, you could just take this and interject it into any place where we're located. And when I say we're, I mean the United States government's military around the world. Ooh, that's not good. I'm sorry about that, but it is what it is. Hey, Brody. So that's another watershed. It might not sound like it now, but you let that pressure cooker erupt and let us push back on getting them, getting out of there, and you'll start seeing some cafes getting shot up and stuff like that. There's been violence in the past on the behalf of the Okinawans. As I said, they're not big on people raping their women and getting in drunk accidents on their streets and making it unsafe for their area to live, just because a government that doesn't, really represent them needs to make a deal with these monsters. Sound familiar? Yeah, it's kind of like us with the Saudis. From there, what other? I'm overlooking at antiwar.com. It looks like Justin Raimondo, his cancer's kicking his ass a little bit. So our thoughts are with him. He'll kick it again, I'm sure. He always does. Speaking of the Koreans, it looks like they're starting to clear some landmines near the border, which is a good sign. That's something that more symbolic than anything else. But again, this is real, and this is Trump, so I give him credit for that. This is the thing. I'm looking for, the bad of the world, and I'm sure if I dig down and I go do a deep dive, I can find some, and I can spend some time on that maybe this weekend. But the headlines are not terrible. Now, I don't mean that there's not people dying in these wars. I mean, of course there are. But I'm trying to watch the empire here, and it looks like the area of concern would be Iran, since Iran and our European quote-unquote allies are bucking Trump's request, and they're making agreements to sell oil and other goods to each other, which is fine. I have no problem with that. Netanyahu, he did his normal ridiculousness at the UN, where he went out there with his papers and his pictures and said that the Iranians have a weapons depot full of nuclear material. This was denied, of course, by the United States government's watchdogs, which is funny and surprising that actually got in the news. It's not on CNN or anything, but they wrote about it, and it's pretty interesting to see that at least the American government, in some respects, is telling him to pump the brakes, because we're not going to go to war with Iran. We might bomb them, we might do this regime change operation, but American citizens are not into sending their troops and their sons to go and die in Iran, a country that will not take it lightly, and will also spark conflict with the Russians. Speaking of the Russians, and this always made me laugh, we've sent 800 troops to the Arctic to continue our battle with the ice up there, to kind of fuck with the Russians and hold positions, which is, again, is just something that only imperial powers do. Without a government, a collective group of citizens is not going to be able to convince 360 million people to give them their tax money so they can go and try to take over the oil reserves of the North Pole. So there's some more intense bullshit done by the military. Syria looks more and more by the day look like Trump's trying to make kind of like a NAFTA deal, where he keeps the troops in there as a threat, and but I think we all know the result is going to be that Assad and the Russians take back Syria and calms things down. And I just think we're going to see what kind of deal can be made afterwards to pull Iranian influence out of the region, which, I'm sorry, will drag Israel and Lebanon into it and keep the entire cycle going. So this is something if Trump's going to fail at because, he doesn't understand it, and two, both sides, the Israelis and the Palestinians, don't care what America says, especially the Israelis. They'll do what they need to do, which they should. I mean, I'm not saying I would agree with them, but they're sovereign. I mean, it has nothing to do with me as an individual living in my state. But the Palestinians, they will suffer as we go, and there's no deal that they're going to make that they're going to be acceptable to. Just like when Trump says that he made the deal to move the embassy to Jerusalem, like that was going to be a good idea, when clearly I think his quote was, "We're going to take it off the table," where he didn't ever ask the Palestinian if we want to take it off the table. And again, I'm not a religious man, but I mean, again, it's blowback. You should know what's going to happen when you stick troops on a small island and populate it with bored servicemen for over 50 years. And the same is true when you support unequivocally a more and more aggressive authoritarian government that is colonizing without any thought to human rights or international law. So that's about 20 minutes. Again, I just wanted to... I have this here. Why not do it? I'm going to be looking through these stories. Maybe I'll dig into Afghanistan a little bit. I know that Mr. Eric Prince was talking about trying to again, he's bringing up that idea of privatizing the military presence there. But I mean, it's kind of looks like he's just trying to grab some resources for the Americans, which again is what imperial powers do. So that's what I see going on. No huge changes so far at the beginning of this week. I'll try to cover as much as I can because I think that most people are going to be stuck on the Kavanaugh thing, and I just don't care either way. I mean, I'll cover it this weekend coming up. Maybe on Saturday I'll do a video about Kavanaugh and the conclusion and where we go from here. If the left has succeeded in trying to destroy probable cause and innocent until proven guilty, but we'll see. I will not be on any of the podcasts this week, Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday, just scheduling. And I think we really need to kind of cool off a little bit. I mean, I had my Facebook retreat, and I'm going to call it that. I retreated from that battlefield. That's like a World War II front. No one wins there, and there's not going to be a Christmas Day truce of any kind. So I've moved on in my life. So that's it. I'm going to watch some hockey and chill. Check us out over on Decentralized News over on YouTube. You can check out my YouTube, which is Voluntary Exchange. We also have our website, Decentralized Truth, where I'll be posting my videos, all my old podcasts if I can get them on there, and a lot of my original writing from years gone by. So from there, peace, and I'll see you guys later.